The United States has gone through the worst recession and the slowest economic recovery since the Great Depression. These events, along with the housing crisis, have had a significant impact on Northwest Georgia, adversely affecting businesses and many lives. And what I'd like to do is ask each of the panelists to name 2 or 3 mistakes that we as a nation made that kind of led up to this unusual event, and maybe a couple, 2 or 3 possible things that we can do to improve our economic condition.
Be glad to start. Well, first off, I think the first problem, or the exacerbated problem, was the historic level of debt that the American consumer, businesses too, but really the American consumer incurred during the decade of the 2000s. If you look at a chart of this, it's amazing how much debt went up from like $6 trillion to $12 trillion in a period of about 10 years, even a little less than 10 years. So in the midst of all that, of the fact that debt was just accelerating at such a high level, the mortgage industry, the banking industry became very easy in their credit, how easy it was to obtain credit, and whether you can have an argument about whether or not the federal government pushed that because of wanting to have home ownership, because that's the American ideal, is to own your own home. Whether or not the rules became a little bit easier, I think they did personally, but if taking that out of the equation, lending got much easier. You could borrow money on less, and the underwriting practices that were put into place just they weren't sufficient to catch the fact that people could not tolerate the debt that they were taking up. So the first sign of negative things going down, boy, the whole house of cards fell with it.
I'll back up a little bit. I didn't even tell my fellow panelists this yesterday we prepared a few comments together. Let me give a disclaimer. I don't intend to be an expert. We're happy to be here to talk about this. I think this would be a better time spent if you all can certainly give your input, or I guess even the way you phrase questions. If you agree with something we say or disagree, but I think a dialogue would be helpful for all of us. But I think one thing that's been missing for a while, I'm not going to get into when I think it started, but we've had a failure of leadership in a lot of different areas. At the federal government, I think partisanship has gone back a long way. You can pick when you think it was at its worst, when it began to get out of control. But we really haven't had problem solvers or an intent from a leadership standpoint to work on issues for quite a while. And it seems like we've even had that same trend occurring at the state level, whether you look at a state like California, which I'm not sure if they even have an idea how bad their debt problem is. Even somewhere like Georgia, where we're not in debt, thankfully, with our Constitution, but we certainly have issues that I'm not sure there's a real plan for how to deal with them. I've always said that you can save yourself to prosperity, and that seems to be the general strategic plan right now, just cut, save. And I'm just afraid the long-term ramifications for the state of Georgia are going to be lower education performance trend, along with lower improvements to our infrastructure. We just don't have any plan or even an idea in the future of when we'll start to do things better again. And that's starting to weigh on some consumer confidence as well. And then the second part is from that leadership standpoint, we're not even willing to admit it, much less do something about it. I think we agreed yesterday, there's still not ample evidence that there's a recovery in place. It's not as bad as it was, and I hear from businesses throughout our community that seem a little more optimistic, but I think that optimism is based on they at least know it doesn't seem to be getting worse, it's sort of stabilized. But until I see hammers being swung or nail guns being used, whichever one you're happy with, I don't see that our local economy has a recovery fully in place to show some sustained growth. It seems like we're just kind of moderating along. We'll have a good quarter and a bad quarter. And so depending on what happens in the next few months at the federal level, and I would say also at the state level, will depend on whether this recovery ever does get the kind of ground it needs to have.
And I can really just echo their comments. I would just add that our problem is debt. We can talk about the housing bubble, and I think that was the most apparent thing that happened, and all of us felt it. But we have a debt-ridden economy. We have budgets that keep being produced that add $1 trillion a year. It is totally unsustainable. We sit here and look what's going on with Greece and Spain and Ireland and other countries, and somehow we think it's not going to affect us. We can just print more dollars and everything will go away. And we're just sitting here getting ready to, I think Bernanke's kicked off QE3, $40 billion per month of mortgage-backed derivative securities. That we're sitting here, that's what got us into the problem in the first place. So now we're going to come around to the back end, and the government's going to set an artificial price for it, flood the market. I don't think our banks, I'm not a banker, I don't think we don't have enough money to lend. It's now we've gone from too easy credit to entirely too tight a credit. And so we've just got this system, it's just like Bryan said, and that's both Bryans. We've got a failure of leadership. And to me, it hadn't really mattered Republican or Democrat. No one's willing to step up to the plate and make the hard decisions because odds are you're not going to be reelected. And until we can get our financial house in order in Washington, in Atlanta, and we have to worry about it here in Dalton and Whitfield, we certainly don't have anywhere near the problems that we have nationally. But until we're willing to tackle those things, I think we're going to continue to have an anemic recovery and the potential of backsliding.
Some of these things have sort of fixed themselves, obviously. We don't have that same lending problem. But this derivative, this mortgage-backed thing, these investment products that are made from that, just as David said, the federal government is now sort of getting involved in it, and you would think we would be backing off of this. Derivatives, those mortgage-backed securities are just one part of what I would call some financial instruments that were in that derivative class. Derivative just means it's based off something else. And when you get to the underlying investment, sometimes you don't even know what you're investing in. Some of these derivative products. Are you really investing in a product? Are you investing in something that does something? Or are you investing in something that is a reflection of something else? If you can see that distinction, that's where we get into trouble. We don't even know what we're investing in. So I don't think we solve those things. Obviously, we're not. The federal government doesn't.
Okay. Obviously, the decline in housing and construction have had a major negative impact on the floor covering industry, which is a mainstay of this economy here. Are you seeing a recovery at this point in time?
We're definitely off the deck, and it's come back somewhat. But if you just go back to 2005, which is about the high water mark for the total carpet industry, and I'm going to keep it in carpet, I can't talk about floor covering overall. We are still, in units produced, we're down over 30% since 2005. So while some dollars have come back, especially in the commercial market, we're sitting here on modular carpet tile in this room, and that costs more to produce, and we sell it at a higher price than we do broadwood carpet. So revenues for a lot of us, especially on the commercial side, have come back closer to where we were in 2005, 6, 7. But we're still way down on units produced. And units produced is what we're all about in the manufacturing industry. That's what we need people for, that's what we need equipment for. So we still have a lot of capacity in buildings and equipment, and unfortunately in people that are not employed within our community. And so we still got a long way to go. And I know we were just talking, as we were visiting yesterday, they've just revised the second quarter GDP down from 1.7 to 1.3. So we're anemic at best, and we've still got a long way to go to just get back from a manufacturing standpoint to where we were 5 and 6 years ago.
Just to echo what David was saying, that the industry that I work in is not floor covering, but of course it works with the floor covering industry. We do a great deal of business with floor covering. We do some business, of course, it's not floor covering, and that's exactly what we're seeing. Floor covering, it is down from where it was in 2005. It's sort of level for the last couple of years, but other areas have improved some. And I'm not saying it's just burning down the barn or anything like that, but we have seen some other areas that have had some improvement, and we're seeing some business, and unfortunately we're able to do business in some of those areas as well. So I'd say floor covering still not there, working on it, and then the non-floor covering look maybe a little better.
I just had one thing, and I think I've heard Mayor Penny use this example. We're happy with companies like Caterpillar and Baxter Labs, or any new project comes to Georgia or to one of our communities. But unless it's a net gain, I think you got to be careful with that. I think the governor announced yesterday that either in 12 or 11 and 12 combined, we've had more new investment, more new jobs created than any other time in our history, or some number like that. Well, I would bet you that's probably just new projects. It doesn't take into account the losses we've had. So if you lose 4,000 jobs at Lockheed, but you add 1,500 at Caterpillar, you're still somewhat in the hole. And so even locally, we talk about our economic development efforts. There have been 800 jobs created through the new processes within the carpet industry. You've got a new hotel just across, right down the street that is doing great. We don't count the new additions, and we still got lagging indicators. I think we all need to just continue to use the right data that measures whether or not we are truly pulling out of this, or if we're just holding our own. I think David's point was recovery still is not truly defined with the kind of numbers we're seeing, and we need to keep working on the projects that will help us get to that full recovery. But until houses are being built, I don't think you're going to see Northwest Georgia improve a whole lot. And I think I can't remember who the source was, but there was a report I saw a few days ago that said that Georgia's unemployment is expected to remain above 8% through 2020. That's a startling number. I mean, I think David mentioned yesterday also, we keep all of us, I hear from our carpet companies that, well, 13 is going to be better. That was in 09. 14 is going to be better. Every time we talk about it, it's another year out, because there's nothing happening systemically, nationally or otherwise, that makes us want to get more confident in that. And so that 2020 number, as bad as it is, I almost think it's also pretty accurate right now.
Any questions from the audience?
I got a question. I've always felt like manufacturing is the future of our country, not just our state or county. As far as higher paying jobs, technology and all that stuff, I'm kind of curious about what are all y'all's thoughts on, are we moving as a nation towards service-based jobs and lower paying jobs, or kind of where are we headed, or where should we be headed? Just kind of curious on y'all's thoughts.
I think history, as you look at it, we've certainly moved to more service-based economy than where we've been. I think we used to be about 45% manufacturing level. Now it's more than that 25 or high 20%. I think you've seen some retrenchment in manufacturing in the last couple of years, or a refocus on it, that it is important. And that's one thing we're blessed with. We have a strong manufacturing base here in Northwest Georgia. It's a blessing and a curse. But at the same time, outside of energy, oil and gas, and the byproducts of that, I don't know anywhere in the United States that's doing well now, service or manufacturing base. The fact that we have a strong manufacturing legacy to draw from here, I think is important. We got things that I know we're going to talk about as we move along about how do we grow that through education and technical initiatives and other things. But I think it is very, very important that for a country to survive, it has to have you have to produce something, some tangible item that other people want. It just can't be all of it. Service is incredibly important, but you've got to produce tangible items at the end of the day. And they do, I think, provide the longest lasting jobs and opportunities. You get into the service world, things come and things go much, much quicker. And I think it gets to be a bit more volatile.
One more quick question. Isn't part of the problem with carpet, you can't export it? I mean, you can't carpet tile. How much, kind of what percent do we do of that?
I can't tell you what the exact export amount is on carpet. Our company does not do a lot of that. We're much more domestically oriented. But you can export carpet, and in the United States, we've got to be I would still think, the leader ultimately in export, or else we're second behind Europe. So we do that quite a bit. More and more of the large manufacturers, though, with the cost of shipping and freight, are opting to actually locate manufacturing in various regions of the globe, not to bring it back here, but to quicker satisfy the demand, especially going on in Asia. And of course, many of our large manufacturers that are based here in Georgia have elected to do that in the last few years and open manufacturing facilities over in China and other areas in Asia to better hit that market. So export is something that we are about and growing that business throughout the globe. Fortunately, we had to have a lot of struggle right now with other floor covering or other carpet products, I should say, coming into the U.S. because still so much of the cost of a square yard of carpet is based on raw materials and not labor. So it's not as easy to make it somewhere else and send it here and beat us at our own game. But certainly you get into some of the ceramics, porcelains, LVTs, VCTs, some of the other hard surface items, and there is a fair amount of that imported.
Okay. Again, to kind of keep us on track, I'm going to then begin to focus a little bit on the state of Georgia and some of the things that are going on here. The state of Georgia has put forth a number of programs to promote the state's economy, such as the repeal of the energy tax on business and the Georgia Ready for Accelerated Development, or what's called the GRAD program for business locations. Are there other areas that the state of Georgia needs to do to help with the state's economy?
Well, I just want to mention one thing about the sales tax on energy, why that was so important to us. Needs to be a little louder. I'm just going to comment on why the sales tax on energy, the exemption that was put into place, why we were requesting that. Our local economy wanted to get, businesses wanted to get that. You know, business manufacturing inputs, the things that we put into the product that we make, those items are not subject to sales tax, generally speaking, because they're all going to be packaged together, resold, and then sales tax will be collected at that point. So to avoid the double taxation from sales tax on those items, we generally exempted the things that go into the product itself. So energy is a main, at least in our industry, energy is a main component in converting raw materials and stuff into carpet and other floor coverings. So we had lobbied and finally were able to get what we thought was an exemption that really put us on parity with other states that are around us that did not tax energy. So we were successful in doing that. That exemption starts next year, 2013. It's phased in over a 4-year period. So gradually that sales tax will drop off the energy inputs and we will then be what we consider to be a level playing field. So that was the whole idea of why it was being requested. It was just to make it equitable or in parity with what other states are already doing in that regard.
But even while we did have one measure finally come down to a compromise, a 4-year phase out, it almost wound up as a 7-year phase out. It was in one body that wasn't really sure they were going to do it at all. So we lobbied hard, we got it done, and that's a good move. But it's amazing to me that 2 tax reform panels or study groups both came back with a pretty good laundry list of things to enact, and very few of that got done. It was almost like, well, it's my idea, so we'll study it again. The repeal, if I remember the numbers right, was somewhere between $100 and $150 million in lost revenue that had been phased out completely. And we said we couldn't afford it, but yet we took the deal closing fund, which is an important fund. We need to have the ability to compete in finally closing deals when we're recruiting new industries, but we increased it from like $20 million to $120 million. And so the question would be, who's more important, your existing industries that are paying this tax and are supporting your communities, or these others you're trying to recruit? Now, if you're really hitting on all cylinders, you're going to do both well. But if the tie should go always to your existing industries, they're already established, they're already employing people, and yet we seem to have shifted that and said, well, they're already paying it, so they're going to keep doing it, and we'll keep giving money to others coming in. So I think we've got, again, that leadership question is trying to fully understand the mechanics of economic development. The cynic in me says, Caterpillar makes the headline. Shaw, Mohawk, J&J, and others putting $1 billion into equipment and running their businesses like they've done for decades with no help from anybody else doesn't make a headline. So I think we got to be real careful when we ask questions of our leaders as to how are you making these priorities? How are you making these decisions based on what you think is important? There was a number of things in the tax reform measures, including reducing the corporate tax, reducing the income tax, or eliminating the corporate income tax. I think your question earlier was about the manufacturing shift or whatever. I look at it as manufacturing as kind of the instigation or the ignition for all other economy. If you've got people working, and they typically do, wages in manufacturing are typically, I think it's 18 to 20% above the average, then you also have other things pop up, from grocery stores to barber shops to car mechanic shop. All the local economy drives off of that. I know in Dalton, as we saw the contraction of our manufacturing base, we saw the same contraction in others. I had restaurants, national chain restaurants, who typically weather a recession pretty well, here locally got close to not being able to stay. We could have had a couple of them that could have closed because that return on investment was lower than in other markets. So I think as we go forward, in the state of Georgia, a lot of good things in our state. We've got a great road system. We've got a good education system when you look at it from a macro standpoint. There are major problems in some areas, but we tout things like the grad program, which is a wonderful, we actually have a grad site in Dalton. Our Carbondale Business Park is certified to be absolutely ready for a company to come in. All the surveys have been done, all the studies from geotechnical, historical, environmental, we've done all the testing, so if you say, I want to build a plant there, you can start construction almost immediately. It's a great program. But the state of Georgia rolls that out and says that's a great thing, and it is, but it didn't cost them a dime. They just get to check it off their list. We, the local community, put every dime into that Carbondale Business Park. From buying the utilities that had to go down there, to buying the land, to grading the land. So I'd sum it up to say to your question is some things have been done that certainly are going to help us. There's a whole lot of other things that could have been done. And I'm waiting as a community leader and many people in my role, what else? How are we going to get the other things that experts have told you to do? It shouldn't have been that hard to decide to phase out a tax that is on an input that causes the eventual price to go up. But it took weeks and months for them to debate it in private, and then they passed it at the last day or two of the session before it really could receive a full debate. So I guess I'd challenge you to continue to ask questions of your elected officials, especially at the state level right now. What's your strategic plan for getting Georgia moving? That 2020 8% unemployment number is going to sit in my mind for quite a while, because I'm afraid it's the indicators show that that's a much better forecast of our future than other things that I can't quite put my hands around.
And again, with this sales tax on energy being repealed over a 4-year period, or phased out in a 4-year period, there's still the provision for local governments to come back and submit an excise tax to make up for that difference. So depending what various local taxing authorities decide to do, that may or may not end up being a state that the state can say we have no taxation on energy inputs. The state may not, but local governments may. And so, again, as a businessman, you're still left with uncertainty, which is what Bryan started the whole thing with, that we got rampant throughout our society right now because of government taxation and regulations. You, as a business person or a homeowner or whatever, you don't know what your future looks like. And it's hard to make plans.
I just just wanted to echo what Bryan said even earlier about leadership at the state level, because this tax fairness study that was done, it was January of last year, I believe is when it came out, 2011. It is the one that was addressing income tax, sales tax, the whole gamut of things. And of course, any time you're going to redo a tax system, there's going to be some people going to win, some people are going to lose. The whole idea is whether or not you're getting the field in such a way that you can foster development. But anyway, that was passed with the idea that it had to be discussed in the legislature. I mean, the council was to present it to the legislature. They had to discuss it. They had to vote on it. That's the way it was supposed to have been done. And it was not. They did not do that. They did do some piecemeal things out of it, some small things. But they really didn't even do what they said they were going to do when they set it up. So, until we can get past that and really realize that we've got to work on these issues together and figure out how to implement the plan, we're going to have some problems.
Do we have a question or two from the audience? Yes.
What percentage of our national manufacturing is carpet?
I couldn't tell you.
It would be a fairly small percent. Mm-hmm.
Isn't it an $18 billion industry? All floor cover, you might know.
If you do all floor cover, yeah, carpet.
think all four covering that, U.S. is about $18 billion.
Carpet set.
Right.
Any other questions? I'm going to bring up a discussion on issues some of you may not be that familiar with, but the state of Georgia and the Georgia Port Authority see the expansion of the Savannah Port as a major driver of economic growth in the future. And what it basically does is the port will be able to receive the larger cargo ships and tankers after completion of the expansion of the Panama Canal. All right, so instead of them coming to our west coast and being railed, they can go straight through the Panama Canal. Do you think this will have any impact on the flooring industry in this region?
I do. I mean, it's very positive for the South and for Georgia for the Savannah Port to be deeper. I think it's at about 42 feet. They're trying to get it up there in that 48-foot range. All of that bodes very, very well. And Savannah is already a sort of all-star port on the east. It needs to be the primary port. And the challenge, though, we've got, I happen to have a board member on my company who's on the Port Authority of Savannah, so I hear about this every quarter. This has been an ongoing multi-year deal. And because of red tape, regulation, not getting along between EPA, EPD, Corps of Engineers, state of Georgia, and state of South Carolina, arguing and fighting, we hadn't done any dredging yet. And the project just keeps escalating in price. Meanwhile, the Panama Canal should be finished next year. We're 4 years away once we initiate the project to get it totally completed. So we're spending time and we're spending money because all the different agencies, regulation, environmentalists, the lawsuit, South Carolina fighting with Georgia, here we are not accomplishing something that is positive for the entire Southeast and certainly positive for the state of Georgia. And I was surprised to learn, I was talking with Charlie Bethel, our local senator, that Northwest Georgia is actually, in Georgia, behind Metro Atlanta, we're the second biggest user of the Port of Savannah, both import and export. And again, it's because of our manufacturing base. So Savannah's very, very important. But with that, between rail and roads, you have to have other good transportation systems to get it from the port. Just because the bigger ships can come in, bringing in more product at a cheaper price per freight load, you still got to get it on into the interior. And we still got work to do in that arena.
Any other comments from the panelists? No, I think
The
that
$600 million price tag that supposedly is the latest for deepening the port, is a lot of money, but nobody can bat an eye at the billions that we added the extra runway at Hartsville-Jackson. Just as Hartsville has been a major economic driver for our state for years, the port's now becoming just that important, and yet we've spent 15 years studying whether this thing should happen. And I think most everybody would have said, we know what we're going to find out from the study, we know it's the right thing to do, but we've got to check all these boxes. And so the sooner we get it done, the better. It can only be positive because Charleston can't go that deep, at least their study says, and they don't have the will to do that, so we need to get it done.
Now let's talk about the unemployment in Georgia. The state offers a number of programs that give businesses incentives to hire workers, such as Quick Start, the Georgia Work Ready program, the retaining tax credit for retaining employees. Is there more the state needs to do to support employment in the state?
Well, I hate to go back and say something about tax code again, but it seems to be my pet peeve or my pet passion. Yeah, something like that. But, a study revision to the tax code would probably be even more beneficial than some of these credits that are done. There must be 25, 30 credits. There are several credits. And I just know that in my practice, and I used to practice publicly as a CPA, I remember these credits, they were very difficult to claim. I mean, you had the retraining credit, for instance, that you're given if you take somebody to rehabilitate them. There's a process you have to go through to do that, of course. There's a certification of that. And I think Dalton College was helpful in doing that. There's somebody up here actually was the person that certified that it was done. But anyway, I can remember the books. You have a book of paperwork that you put together to do one of those. Now, it was a good credit. Don't mean to say that it wasn't something that was utilized. But I don't know that it was effective in getting people to actually go do these things, because first off, only the larger companies could really put together the manpower to do it, to do everything they do. Most employers are small companies. They don't have the firepower to sit here and even know what the credits are and then figure out how to go about giving them. So I'm just not sure. The study that was done, the council, once again, that council, the legislature, they studied that issue, and they also said they were not sure about, they didn't have any studies that told them that any of those credits were really effective in doing what they were set up to do. They were sometimes claimed, but they didn't know that they were really getting the job done. So, I just think rather than focusing on credits, we need to be focusing on how to make that tax structure work the best, the most efficient, and be competitive against other states around us.
And I would just add from, personal experience with our company, we don't hire people because of tax credits or incentives out of Atlanta or Whitfield County, Dalton, anywhere. You hire somebody because you got a job for them to do. And, buying an asset, like accelerated depreciation from the federal government, it may affect the timing of when you buy that asset. Hey, if I get 50% accelerated depreciation, if I do it at 12, I may do it at 12 versus 13, but you don't go buy the asset or employ the person just for the tax credit. So I think it's a lot of feel good about nothing at the end of the day. I don't think it moves the needle.
Okay. You have any comments, Bryan?
Yeah, unemployment, a lot of things we've been talking about doing on that locally, but it's basically a function of education or the skill set in your area. Obviously, job creation and the availability of jobs is a component, but if you've got a vibrant economy and you've got a trained workforce, people can migrate through the economy. Unfortunately, we've had two drastic things happen. The industry transformed as it needed to be competitive and introduced more technology at a time when they had the ability to do so, and you had a group of people who still think that their job's coming back, whether it be a spun yarn, and I don't know carpet at the level I should, but a spun yarn job or a creeling job. Those jobs are gone forever. And so those in those jobs should have already embraced that they've got to do something different, and they got to find what that is. Now, the corollary problem with that is we're not set up real well to administer that. We've got all these federal and state programs that allow some retraining, pays for some tuition, but it is an inexact science at best, in that how we apply resources to really creating that one-to-one interaction of a job and a skilled employee, we don't do very well. We kind of almost hope it happens depending on what money we throw at it. An example from your notes for your question, Larry, Quick Start is a globally known and globally respected program. Meaning, when Caterpillar comes into Georgia, they're going to have the best training known across the globe. We get high kudos from everybody when that happens. IBC locally used Quick Start, meaning when they hired their first 100 people, Quick Start came in, worked with Dalton State College, put professors and teachers together, learned the process, and then trained their employees to do the job. Well, it seems to me, if I was in charge, that you have the same ability to go help existing industries who've also transformed. But you can't. I can't. If David says he's changed his processes, and so he can be more competitive globally, but he needs to retrain 20 people, he can't get Quick Start help. He has to go do it through these other mechanisms. So we can do a much better job, if you're talking about just industry, sort of doing a massive triage, go understand what the people are that need help, get the training that's available. We've got plenty of resources here, and then apply those. But instead, we let federal program A compete with state program B, and we just have trouble navigating through the bureaucracy. And I do it every day. I get confused. I can't imagine some people that are out there saying, I need help, and I don't know how to get it. So education, when you look at it from a local standpoint, we try to break it down in Dalton Whitfield to say there's points along the scale. Let's forget the unemployed for just a second. I don't mean forget. Let's park it for a minute. But those that, from a future pipeline standpoint, there's multiple points along the education timeline that we lose people. They can get lost as early as age 5. meaning they came from a family that had no way to help them be prepared for kindergarten. And they show up for kindergarten, and they're behind everybody in their class. They potentially check out of school at that point. And most of them are going to go another 8 or 9 years because state law says you can't drop out till you're 16. But they're technically not engaged from day one. We as a community are putting in programs with our school systems, with our other agencies like the Friendship House, our school and our church programs. We want to know where those children are and how we can help them. The second point we've seen to lose kids is somewhere around grade 3, because the old saying is you learn to read up to grade 3 and then you read to learn after grade 3. But if you can't read in the 4th grade, you're never going to learn science or social studies. So our local systems, again, with a lot of different people supporting them, have said we're going to make a conscious effort that every child is on grade level by the end of the 3rd grade. The state of Georgia didn't do that. Matter of fact, the state of Georgia really doesn't hold you accountable for your reading levels at grade 3. They make you take a CRT test and a few others, but if you don't pass, they just put you on a list. We've decided our own measurements are important, and we're going to look at every kid and help them be successful. And then the third point really happens somewhere between the 5th grade and post-secondary, after they graduate high school. It's really how they figure out what they're going to do in this world. And we've been kind of letting that happen, by chance. Help mom and dad give a little bit of advice. Maybe the kid gets some exposure through an internship, which we know is a proven way to help people. But if they don't figure it out, they may graduate, they may not. They might even go get a 4-year degree from Georgia and wind up they don't want to do that for a living. There are many kids walking around your technical schools right now who have 4-year bachelor's degrees who can't find jobs in their profession, the career they got, and they're going back to become a nurse or an electrician or some other things. So we locally have said we're not going to wait on the state or the federal government to tell us what to do anymore or to even beat us up. We're going to get way ahead of the curve, and we're going to find those transition points of the children that are on those and help them. So that's your pipeline building. The second area is you asked a question about unemployed. Our Department of Labor commissioner met with us about 3 weeks ago and basically said, we're here to help you, but we don't know how. And that really woke me up because there's millions of dollars in that budget. But his point was, we've got antiquated software systems, and so although we can process somebody to get an unemployment check, we really can't help them get back employed. So how do we help you guys? How do y'all help us help you? Well, that was a pretty daunting question. And then we had HR managers in the room who said, oh, guess what? I've got 20 positions open. I got 50 positions open. I can't find good people. Well, that's a second shoe to fall as far as my attitude. And so we're caught in this middle where we've got people need jobs, companies need people, but we're not making the interaction. So you're going to hear about it if we pull it off. We're asking for volunteers. But we are working with the Department of Labor, our churches, our nonprofit agencies. We're going to try to figure out these 500 or 3,000 or 6,000 people that are unemployed. We're going to try to figure out where they are. Do they have is it a skill problem? Is it an attitude problem? Is it a resource problem? And once we diagnose that, we're going to go make these agencies, these millions of dollars that are flowing from the federal and state government, work for people. If they want to become a paramedic or an EMT, we're going to find a slot for them and help them get to that program. But we're also going to challenge these agencies that, I always pick on truck driving and cosmetology. If we need 50 truck drivers a year for the local economy, let's produce 50 truck drivers. But let's not produce 5,000. Or if we need 5 hairdressers or people to cut our hair, let's produce 5 and not 500. But instead, we don't do that. We've got to get much more direct as a state, and maybe one day as a nation, let's at least work with the state right now, that we make this one-to-one interaction occur a little more proactively. We don't have the resources anymore to let things happen by all night. That's my speech for today.
All right. I know we've already talked about a lot of things going on in the community, but I think as a way to wrap this up, the other two panelists, do you have anything that you would like to comment on as far as any initiatives that the community needs to focus on to promote growth?
Yeah, I'll just continue on the education theme, but I'm going to switch gears a little bit and go on up into that high school and secondary education. We've got a huge asset. We're right here at Dalton State College having this in our community. And continuing to grow Dalton State College in the baccalaureate world and on into the graduate world, I think is key. With Georgia Northwestern coming in, we have got to continue to develop our technical assets. We need it in our manufacturing industry. We need it for young folks coming into that industry to have a better knowledge of robotics, mechatronics, electronics, etc. But we also need it for our current people. Today, when our company wants to do things in lean manufacturing, Six Sigma, other things like that, we typically have to go to Georgia Tech. And we need to be able to do that locally. We need to be able to have that for supervisors, for plant managers, for other folks, to get that training, because that's the key. Everything continues to change. You don't just graduate from college or technical school and I'm done. Anybody in this room, you're continuing to learn and be challenged all the way along. And so I think that's a challenge to continue to synthesize in our community better, to where we really give kids opportunities as they come out. And I'll say, I don't mean to put down a baccalaureate degree. Everybody doesn't have to go to college. And we've grown up, at least in my generation, that if you didn't go get a 4-year college degree, you're a failure. And that is not the case. And so we have got to have a climate that encourages and rewards people whichever avenue you go, because everybody's needed to get the job done at the end of the day.
And I might just add to these comments that we've made that the importance of continuing these public-private partnerships that we've initiated in this community, getting everybody together to promote our community. I've heard the mayor many times talk about, it's about getting our community in such a way that people will desire to live here. And so we make that happen by everybody being involved. And the Grow Greater Dalton initiative that was done, that's a public-private kind of thing, because the private industries put money in it, individuals have put money into it, the governmental units have put money into it. And so those kinds of things, I think that's how we'll make it happen. If we just wait for government to do it, government is us. I mean, we elect these people, we're part of that. So we just need to continue doing more of that, and I think we'll be certainly more successful in making this a great community.
Well, David's giving me the time's up sign back in the back, so I guess we need to wrap it up. David, would you like to make a comment?
I just want to thank our panelists for being with us.